Good morning friends. This is our third lecture on our series of History of English Literature. In our earlier two videos, we have discussed about Anglo-Norman Age and the Dark Ages. The time period for Dark Ages was 500 to 1066 AD, and after the Battle of Hastings in 1066, a new age began, which was Anglo-Norman period. With the birth of Chaucer in 1340s, a new age came, which is Age of Chaucer. And with the death of Chaucer in 1400, this Age of Chaucer ended. So here is the chronology. From 500 to 1066 AD was the Dark Ages, and after that came Anglo-Norman period beginning from 1066 to 1340s, and after that came the Age of Chaucer, which was from 1340 to 1400 AD. So if you have not watched the earlier two videos on History of English Literature, then you can simply check the link in the description below. And also we are covering all the ages one by one in our upcoming videos. So if you are new to this channel and have not subscribed the channel yet, then don't forget to subscribe the channel for more updates. So having said that, let's try to understand why this age is fully dedicated to the poet Chaucer. What were the reasons that made the scholars or the researchers to call this period Age of Chaucer? So before beginning this age, let's look at the social, political and economical changes which plays a major role in shaping the thoughts and giving direction to the society of the future. Let's begin with political issues first. Number one is the 100 Years of War, which began in 1337 and ended in 1453. So this 100 Years War of 1337 was in between England and France. Although it is known as the 100 Years War, but it lasted for 116 years. It must be remembered that during this period, England III was the King of England. And now what happened was the King of France died and there was no successor after him. So Edward III claimed the French crown. The whole country, France, was disappointed, and this led to hundreds of years of war. In the beginning of this 100 Years War, England had great victories which later led towards national unity. For the first time, people of England started taking pride in themselves and demanded everything of their own. In our previous lecture, we seen how Norman conquest happened and how Normans overtook England. We also saw the French became the language of upper class and the Latin became the language of clergy. The position of English language was somewhat lost during the age of Anglo-Norman period. However, due to the victories in the beginning of 100-year war, English people started taking pride in themselves. They demanded their own identity and they demanded their own language. Chaucer was lucky enough to born in this age, and he started writing Canterbury Tales in Middle English. His Canterbury Tales describes a vast number of characters, professions and 14th century England. These Canterbury Tales became popular, and Chaucer wrote these Canterbury Tales in Middle English. There were generally 5 dialects spoken during this period of time, and these 5 dialects were Kentish, Southern, Northern, West Midlands and East Midlands. If you have our study material, you will find all these important writers, important works and important events in chronology. So if you don't want to waste hours and hours of your time in writing down the notes, and if you believe in smart work, then you can simply check the link in the description below to order our study material right now. So having said that, all these 5 dialects were spoken during the Middle English. It is very easy to remember all these 5 dialects. All you just have to remember the 4 directions, beginning from north, south, east and west. And these 4 directions will give you how to remember these 5 dialects: Northern, Southern, East Midland, West Midland, and in the middle there is a Kentish. So it is not very difficult to remember all these 5 dialects. But an important point to remember here is that Chaucer used East Midlands. This East Midland was generally spoken in the city London, and due to this particular dialect is also known as London dialect. Even Chaucer made fun of the remaining 4 dialects in his Canterbury Tales. So here we have to understand that 100 Years War began in 1337, and due to the few victories in the very beginning of this war, English people demanded their own language and nationality. They wanted their own identity. And that's why English again started dominating the country. In 1387, Chaucer wrote Canterbury Tales in a dialect from Middle English. As we have just mentioned in the beginning of this video, that in order to understand the particular history, we need to understand the social, political and economical factors. So we must understand that this 100-year war also brought so many difficulties in the lives of Britain. Due to this war, economy of England was drained. We need money to fight war, and that's why the taxes on the citizens of Britain was increased. And then there is a Black Death of 1340s. If you don't know what is Black Death, then it is simply a kind of pandemic that we are going through right now. Just like we have COVID-19, there was Black Death of 1340s. As we see, many people died during these hard circumstances of COVID-19. Half of the population of Great Britain also died in the Black Death of 1340s. On one hand, English people want their national identity. They want their identity in whole Europe. On other hand, the England was suffering from hundreds of years of war, Black Death and so many social and economical challenges. And this all difficulties led into the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. This Peasant Revolt was led by Fort Tyler, and if you want to know more about this Peasants' Revolt of 1381, then you can simply check the link in the description below, where I have discussed about this particular event in a great detail on our series on Marxism. So if you have also not watched the Marxism, you can check the link in the description below of this particular series, Marxism. So now, having talked about the three major events, 100th year of war, Peasants' Revolt of 1381 and earlier the Black Death of 1340s, let's talk a little about Geoffrey Chaucer, who was criticized by Matthew Arnold for lacking high seriousness. Matthew Arnold was one of the authentic critics after John Dryden, and if you have our literary criticism booklet, you will find Matthew Arnold's criticism on many authors like John Milton, Shakespeare, Thomas Gray, Robert Burns, etc. According to Matthew Arnold, it was not only Geoffrey Chaucer who lacked the high seriousness, but also there was another poet named Robert Burns who too lacked high seriousness. When you study the American literature, you will find a famous work titled Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. The title of that novel, Catcher in the Rye, is taken from Robert Burns' Coming Through the Rye. The novel Catcher in the Rye is one of my favorite novels, and I have read it a couple of times. It was one of those novels which was recommended by a friend who was preparing for UPSC exams. So I have enjoyed Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger a lot. Now let's get back to our discussion on Chaucer, who was criticized by Matthew Arnold for lacking high seriousness. There is a reason for that, as England was going through many difficulties like 100-year war, Peasant Revolt and so many social challenges. Geoffrey Chaucer was not at all interested. He was rather writing for kings and the courts. He was writing humorous works like Canterbury Tales, whereas his contemporaries like John Gower and William Langland were interested in the social issues. Even William Langland's Piers the Plowman was a social satire, and it is one of the great work that you cannot skip while preparing for your UGC-NET examination. So according to Matthew Arnold, a poet should have some moral sense. Morality should be the guiding force behind a poet. In most of the tales in Canterbury Tales, we find Chaucer talking about lust and sex. For instance, in Merchant's Tale, we find the character January, who is 60 years old, had a lusty wife, May, 20 years old. Similarly, in Miller's Tale, we see an 18-year-old woman, wife of carpenter, getting into a lustful relationship with an Oxford University student called Nicholas. On the other hand, in Reeve's Tale, we see two students taking revenge on Millers by laying down his wife and daughter. So Canterbury Tales is full of such incidents. There are the instances of sodomy also. So Chaucer was not much more interested in morality. The similar look-alike comment we see in Samuel Johnson's preface to Shakespeare, where Samuel Johnson criticized Shakespeare for lacking morality. Samuel Johnson said, "Shakespeare write with no moral purpose." So in the end, we have covered most of the important details that you should remember from Age of Chaucer as you are preparing for UGC-NET examination. Although we have not covered Canterbury Tales in detail, we will discuss Canterbury Tales sometimes later in our separate video. For now, we are only going to cover British literature chronology, In our next video, we are going to talk about our age, the revival of learning, which began after the death of Chaucer in 1400. This particular age of Chaucer was from 1350s to 1400, and our next age on age of revival began from 1400 to 1450. So with this, we come to the end of this video. I hope you found the video worth your time. If you are new to this channel, then don't forget to subscribe the channel for more updates. So that's it for this video. Thank you.